Welcome to today's webinar over future proofing your calling stack for the next 3 years of growth. And today we have the speaker, Mr. Pranav Bhatnagar, who has 14 years of experience in the customer success domain. And he has also worked with the Google, LinkedIn. So today, Pranav will share the insights of his experience, current scenario, and for the next 3 years of growth, how you can achieve it. So over to you.
Thank you, Utkarsh, for the welcome. I hope all of you guys can hear me well. I am really happy to be here and really excited to host this webinar for you guys. Um, I'm very grateful that for all the people who have joined. Just to set the tone up for the webinar, so we are today talking about future-proofing your calling stack for the next 3 years of growth. And I think ever since AI has come in, all industries have been evolving at a manic pace, right? They've been evolving at a rapid pace. We don't know what the AI revolution holds for us next, but it's just that the growth has been exponential within the SaaS industry and within other industries as well. So if you go over to the next slide, you would see that your sales teams, right, or any customer facing team for that example, for example, right? So I take care of customer success here at CallHippo. Your sales teams, customer success teams, SDR teams are scaling faster, right? So with all of the data revolution and AI revolution and how data is feeding into AI, right, your sales teams are scaling faster. And your calling infrastructure obviously needs to catch up with it, right? Which is the whole point of this webinar today. We are going to talk about how your calling infrastructure can be at par with the growth rate that your sales teams and other customers facing teams are experiencing, right? Now, just the definition of the problem. So your calling systems, right, don't sort of tear apart instantly, right? So they are not falling apart instantly, but there are leakages that seem to prop up. So they're just cracking up quietly, right? So calls that are not connected, calls that are dropped, calls that are missed, all of those are leakages within the system. The routing doesn't happen properly, or the routing is not adequate to, accommodate for the agents that are present. The tool does not give you good insights into capacity planning. So all of those are leakages from my perspective, because a calling tool needs to be efficient at delivering the product that it's meant for, which is connectivity, right? So that's the value realization lever. The second thing is that it also needs to give me good insights as a leader in terms of capacity planning, right? So we at CallHippo take that really seriously. And so when your calling systems seem to show that problem, then one of the problems that arises, of course, there is lost revenue. So your contract rate with the customer decreases, and there is lost revenue. And then there is a poor customer experience. So for example, a customer calls in, or you call the customer, you're not able to hear each other properly, the call doesn't go well, the conversation doesn't go well, and the customer has a poor experience, right? And this is something that all of us have experienced here in India. We've got calls coming in all the time. Now, of course, the calls are flagged on our mobiles, but we've got calls coming in all the time. And there are dropped calls, there are AI agent calls, and all sorts of calls that are coming in at one point in time or the other. We have all experienced this, right? So now on the next slide, we are going to look at how can we go ahead and Utkarsh, can you flip the slide? Right. So on the next slide, what we're going to look at is that, what are the signals that your calling stack is cracking, right? And one of the major signals is that the leaders are not getting any visibility into outcomes, right? So for example, you don't know how many of your connected calls are actually translating into revenue, right? I was working with this enterprise customer, a couple of quarters back, and they've got a very interesting way of pulling data from CallHippo, and then they're putting that into their data warehouse and drawing insights on how many outreaches have to be made in order for a customer to convert. Now that's really valuable data, right? So for example, for an enterprise customer, that cycle, the sales cycle, is going to be longer. So my outreach to that particular customer is going to be many times, right? For a mid-market customer, it's going to be lesser. For an SMB customer, probably not as much, right? Probably the SMB customer is totally on a tech touch model, and we are not giving any sort of human effort to that, or there is only targeted human effort to that. So there is no visibility into the outcomes. That's the primary indicator that your calling system needs to be replaced. There may be missed follow-ups as well, but that's not only attributed to the calling system, that may be attributed to a faulty process as well. So you need to look at data and figure out whether it's a tool problem or whether it's a process problem. And then, if we don't get good insights, then as managers and leaders, what we do is that we are just adopting a reactive approach rather than coaching the individuals, right? At CallHippo, we have this really significant development, which is called sentiment analysis, one of the features that I love. And throughout the presentation, we are going to talk about it. But here's what it does. So it's going to draw out insights of your call, and then just going to say that if the call was on a positive note, if the call was on a negative note, and then there would be key moments that have to be established. So, for example, if I'm making a call to Utkarsh, who's the customer, do I introduce the product, right? Do I talk about the pricing points? Do I talk about any of the competitors, right? And the benefits that we are offering versus them. So all of those pointers are going to be recorded within the sentiment analysis, right? So it's a great tool for understanding how your calls are going overall as a leader. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. So call volume spikes can be unpredictable, right? And especially in this era. So basically what you do is that in a traditional model, what you would do is that you would scale by scaling your team size, right? So your team size multiplies, your calling volume multiplies, and everything scales, right? However, now with automation coming in, what you can do is that one of the approaches to scaling is that you put some of the customers, as I talked about the tech touch model, so you put a segment of the customers on, AI-based calling, right? Or something that's become really a rage over LinkedIn and other social platforms is the AI SDR, right? So there are a lot of tools that are offering AI SDRs these days, and I think it's an effective way of getting across to your customers. There are markets that don't like to take AI calls as such, but then there are markets that are very receptive to AI calls. So I think in the latter part of the presentation, I'm also going to talk about how calling patterns vary via geography, how connectivity can vary via geography, right? Um, Second thing that, once the call volume spikes, the expectations of the customer with AI coming in have undergone drastic change, right? So basically what the customer is expecting is that I need an instant response, right? So if you jump onto a Swiggy, Zomato, or any kind of a customer support platform, even Amazon these days, you're expecting an instant response, right? And so basically what they've done is all of them have automated their L1 support. So you'll be talking to an AI agent over there, and that's going to do the basic troubleshooting for you. And then if you really want to know any sort of billing related questions or payment related questions or anything of that sort, where a human agent needs to get involved, then it's going to be handed off to a human agent, right? So response time expectations have really undergone a drastic change ever since the AI agents have come in. And finally, compliance and quality are some non-negotiables, right? Recently, I'm working with this customer that has very specific compliance requirements because they're housed in the European sector and they have GDPR requirements, right? So that's one. The quality is another, because if you're not having good quality conversations with your customers, there's a slim chance of them converting, right? Moving on to the next slide. Right. So here's the litmus test. Now, we are planning for 3 years of growth, right? And 3 years, you cannot predict what's going to happen because the pace at which we are growing right now, back 2 years, probably lesser than that. Call Hippo used to be majorly a telephony company. Now we are conversational intelligence platform, right? So we have evolved in a span of 1.5, 2 years. Um, pretty much as a product. We have become a conversational intelligence omni-channel platform, right? So you need to take the 3-year growth test. What you could ask, the questions that you can ask yourself is that can my calling tool handle 3x the volume? 3x? That's not really a number that I really appreciate, right? So I had asked myself the question that if I 10x my volume, right, then what's going to happen, right? Because over 3 years, if you're looking at growing fast, as we are in the SaaS industry, so we are looking at growing fast. So you want to 10x the calling volume. When you 10x the calling volume, you get a certain amount of connectivity rate. Your first contact happens with the customer. That translates into revenue, right? So that gets the ball rolling right there and then. The second question you want to consider is that can I get key insights from the conversations that I'm having with the customers? Sentiment analysis, what's the talk ratio, what is the customer feeling about my product, how am I pitching to various segments, right? Which pitch is working with which segment, right? Are there any sort of segments that can be on a tech model, right? So all of these questions are very important for you to ask, because from an operational perspective, there's a ticket size, a deal size, right? And then there is cost on your end. So with AI agents, you can go ahead, reduce the cost, right? So it's very important for you to gain these key insights within your tool so that you're able to make those actionable business decisions. Operational efficiency is one of the key things, right? So can the reps perform better without burning out? CallHippo has this brilliant feature of the auto dialer, so you can go ahead and use the auto dialer to increase the operational efficiency. And then can we scale without rebuilding everything? So it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel all the time. You can go ahead and replicate same models across customer segments and scale them, right? Moving on to the next slide. Right. So we need to have a definition of what future ready means, right? And so one of the metrics of measuring if we are future ready is that your performance goes 10x, right? So we are talking about increasing your calling volume. Again, you get a certain set of connectivity, revenue increases, conversations increase, right? Then does it offer you real-time data, real-time insights into the calls that are happening? And then does it sort of automate workflows so the manual work that the reps are doing right now is reduced, right? In traditional times, what used to happen was that the good old telephony systems used to offer reports that were uh, Excel based, and you used to download all of the Excels and then put on like 100 filters and then see the data. CallHippo has some brilliant dashboards where you can go ahead and see data. We give you insights into which geographies are working out for you, what's your outgoing connectivity rate, how are your customers feeling about the conversations that they're having. So all of those metrics and all of those insights are really important in order to know the pulse of your customer. Moving on to the next slide. Right. So here's a very interesting case study, right? So Lead Squared, the CRM, one of my favorite customers, and I think the problem that they came to us was that they were experiencing response delays. And so what we did was that we did a deployment of the auto dialer, right? And so what the auto dialer does is, just for reference, that it would, so you can upload a bunch of data to the auto dialer, leads data, and then it starts churning that data. And whenever the call connects to an actual human being, it's routed to a representative, right? So they adopted the parallel dialer. We boosted their outbound speed, and then they had a round robin mechanism, or you can call a rotation mechanism, where they distributed calls evenly throughout the agents. And then the impact of this whole thing was that we reduced the missed call rate by 18%, and then improved the overall response time by 40%, right? So what that came out was that, the goal was to reduce the missed call rate, and we had a 30% reduction in the overall rates, right? So here's the thing. I mean, one of the major things is that if you're analyzing this data right? And you're looking at all of the calling metrics, it gives you some key insights. And this was where we actually created value for Lead Squared as a product, right? Lead Squared is still a very valued customer. I work with their team, and it's a very valued customer, and they're still with CallHippo since a couple of years. Can we go ahead? Right. So here's an insight into how connect rate is calculated. Pretty simple. Completed calls by total calls into 100, right? And so you may say that, hey, what's completed calls? Are those calls where I'm having actual human conversations? Not quite, because there may be calls that may run into voicemails, right? And then customers come up to me all the time saying that, hey, my calls are running into voicemail. That can be a function of a lot of things, right? So we need to look at the calls that are actually connected, actual human conversations, and then that's the metric that we are targeting at. So you can divide the connected calls by total calls and then multiply it by 100. And so if you are doing 100 calls and 75 those are connecting, that means that you have a very high connect rate, right? Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. So here are some industry benchmarks, right? So now we are looking at that. What are some of the industry benchmarks for sales teams, right? And with respect to connectivity rates, if it's under 10%, you need to really let go of the tool, right? So if it's giving you 10% connectivity or under 10% connectivity, it really means that, the quality or timing, there are quality issues, there are timing issues, right? So we need to probably either relook at the workflows that we have with that particular tool and go ahead and flag that to them, or you probably need to get a new tool, right? 10 to 20% is actually quite common, but that means that there's further room for optimization, right? And then 20 to 30% is quite strong. 40% is absolutely amazing, right? Now here's how you can optimize for connectivity, right? We are talking about the auto dialer over here. With manual calling, you can get like rates that are higher than 40%, obviously. But we are talking about the auto dialer. So typically in the industry, what happens is that if you're churning the data too fast, right? If the dialer is churning the data too fast, then you're going to have abandoned calls because you don't have as many agents. Or if your agents are having conversations with the customers, they're going to be abandoned calls. Now, if you churn the data very slow, then they're going to be idle time with the agents, and you're like, that's not efficient because my agents are sitting idle, and that's a loss for me, right? So that's typically how the auto dialer behaves. We have a wonderful feature which is called auto pacing within the auto dialer that sort of defines an auto pacing ratio for you. And if you're a beginner at using the parallel dialer, then you can just use the auto pacing and it would run the campaign for you efficiently. Moving on. Utkarsh, can we switch over to the next slide? Yeah. So as I talked about it in the earlier stages of the webinar, right? So there are some global market differences. Calling culture varies via countries. One of the major things that I see these days is that if we are looking at the India market, right? So we are trying to. There's one of a very valued customer that I have, and the other day, they are an Amazon business seller, and the other day we were running a couple of calls via the AI agent, and that customer pointed out a very essential thing. He said that the Indian SMB customers that I typically cater to have a very short patience threshold, right? So if the AI agent is not behaving in a human manner, or if the AI agent is behaving, if the workflow is haywire, then it needs a couple of seconds for the person to just hang up, right? So then the SMB market, or probably the other markets as well, have a low patience threshold. But I've seen geographies where, AI agents are doing pretty well. US being one, UK being another, Australia being another. So in those sort of geographies, AI agents are doing well, and AI agents are seeing high connectivity rates as well. And there is impact created in terms of, automating the L1 support or having better SDR contact rates, right? So calling culture would be different via region, right? Then the roles matter, right? So, for example, if your ICP is VP of tech companies, or if your ICP is, call center teams, right? So, all of those decision makers would vary, right? And they have different availability windows. So, you really need to be cognizant of VP is going to be really busy throughout his day, so you need to catch him up at a time where he is available. So probably early in the morning or just after lunch. Those are some slots where I get hold of my customers, right? Or later in the evening works as well. We are all done with work, but they may not be looking for your call later in the evening because if it's a Friday, they'd just probably head out for coffee, right? So they may not be looking at your call at that point in time. But point being, aside, jokes aside, point being that, all decision makers have different availability windows. So you need to sort of understand that what availability windows are working for you. One of my customers in the hospitality industry had a very valid point. They wanted some report customizations. We built out a report for them called the peak hour traffic report, right? And so that is a heat map of how much traffic you're getting in a particular hour. So that sort of defines not only the incoming or the outgoing call volumes, but that sort of also defines that, what's the connectivity rate that you're getting hour by hour, right? So you can go ahead and track those kind of reports within your calling tools, and they just make sense. That kind of data just makes sense, right? And then the tone and pacing, the way they work in one market may fail in the other, right? So the tone that you adopt, the pacing that you adopt, the cadence, the diction of your speech, all of that matters in various markets. Moving on. Right. So as I said, here are some typical market comparison across regions. So for example, the US, you succeed in the US if you're focusing on speed, relevance, and direct value, whereas UK responds to a more consultative and respectful engagement. Canada is built on warmth, trust, and preparation. Australia prefers natural conversation, and India rewards patient and relationship continuity, right? Moving on. And so these insights, right, they're just built from our experience of analyzing data. You may have a different experience, but these are typically insights that we have experienced across 4,000 or 5,000 customers that we have at the present moment. Five factors that improve connect rates, right? So doing your calls again in high availability windows, right? So as I said, there are certain times that convert better than the other. You need to look at data to figure that out, that which time slots are converting for you, right? And conduct your calls within those brackets. Capacity planning could be done likewise. So you could go ahead and have calls you have more agents to make calls within the high availability windows, right? Then you should be able to use recognizable caller IDs, right? Um, Following up is one of the key things, right? Even with my team, I cannot stress enough. If you just drop them off a call and a follow-up SMS, that's really not going to work. One other thing that I really want to mention, I think, which we didn't bring up on the slide, is multi-channel orchestration, right? So there are multiple channels that a customer can be reached by. You can be reached by calling, email, WhatsApp, SMS, right? And so we built out an omni-channel experience precisely because of that use case, because we wanted to bring all of your omni-channel conversations in one dashboard. So for example, if you go to the CallHippo dashboard, it has something called the CallHippo inbox. And so within those inbox, you can see conversations from various channels, right? So that's something that really makes sense, because if you're following up consistently through one channel, which is not converting, that doesn't do any good, right? But if you're reaching out to customers on WhatsApp, if you're reaching out to customers on SMS, that just creates brand value, right? So the customer is eventually going to give in, and they'd be like, okay, let's schedule a demo and let's take a look at the product, right? Making useful making good use of time for the customer. That is one of the other things. You need to have the context and the agenda laid out, and then finally using reliable quality tools, right? So if you're into auditing calls, then you can use tools like sentiment analysis. You can use a lot of other tools as well. With AI coming in, there are many insights. CallHippo is a conversational intelligence platform, and we've been building that for the past couple of years, right? And all of these analytics are always evolving. They're never stagnant. They're always evolving. So you really need to hear in on what your customers are saying. Moving on, right? Timing optimization is one of the major things. So we've talked about this before a couple of times. Midweek calls are better, so they are outperforming start and end of week, right? Because start of the week you're too busy, end of the week you're slacking off, you're not in the mood really to take any sort of calls, right? So start of the week, end of the week, no good. Midweek calls are great, right? So probably you'd want to run more campaigns on Wednesdays, right? Late morning shows get higher answer rates, right? And higher engagement rates, and that kind of makes sense. So once you're done with your major part of your day, right, and you're just slipping into the lunch hour, then if you get a call, you're more likely to pick it up, right? Because you're done with certain tasks over there and you have some pocket of time where you can have a conversation. And then tracking connect rate by hour, one of the major metrics. So if you have like a connectivity heat map within the calling tool that you're using, you can go ahead and uncover some opportunities that are lying in there. And if you are able to align your calling patterns with the time windows that are converting the most for you, then your connectivity rates would really hit the rooftop. Moving on. Yep. So let's talk about strategies, right? So then having local numbers increase connect rates, obviously. So if I'm an Australian and I see an Australian number coming in, I'm more likely to pick up the call. If I'm an Indian, I see an Indian number coming in, I'm more likely to pick up the call, right? Then using consistent caller IDs, right? So that there is a brand recall associated with it. For example, if you have something popping up on your screen that has Call Hippo written on it, then you're more likely to take up that call if you're like a Call Hippo customer. And you can also go ahead and auto rotate your numbers, right? So what that ensures is that the burden of calls that you're putting on one number is sort of distributed, so the likeliness of the number getting spam is limited and the life cycle of the number expands, right? Now, persistence is again another thing. So I always tell my team that, if you've had a successful connect, keep on following up, keep on following up, keep on following up, right? In my experience, it's only after the third or the fourth follow up that you're able to convert the customer, right? Going back to that case study that my customer did, how many outreaches have to be made in order to connect with a customer. So some valuable insights, if it's an enterprise customer, the sales cycle is 6 to 7 reach outs, right? So you need to have onboarding calls, you need to have other calls, demos, all of that, talk about various features before a customer converts. SMB customers would convert typically within, 2 to 3 reach outs, mid market, somewhere there in between, right? So that's basically persistence. And as I said, that, if you reach out to them over multiple channels, there is a high likeliness that they would respond to you. Moving on. Yeah. Pre-call research is one of the things that I always tell all of my customers to do, right? So you need to set up the agenda, you need to clearly define what are the achievables from the call, right? So if it's a product demo, then you need to be able to justify that what is the feature about, how is it going to deliver value, what's going to be the outcomes by which it is evaluated to define success. So all of those moments, right, within the call are key moments and they're very essential for the customer. So you can only be successful when you're only achieving those moments. And this is where, your calling tool is very important. So it can give you insights into 60% of your calls are achieving those moments, and then you can drive that number up from there, right? And then here's a simple system that you can establish, right? So first call establishes the initial awareness. Second call gives a new angle, right? And the third call sort of adds urgency, at the same time, not pressurizing the customer as such. Moving on. Right. So now we talk about some mistakes to avoid, right? And here are like killers of connectivity rates. So if you're calling without checking, what time is it, or if you're calling in windows that are low availability windows, then you're not going to receive a good connect rate, right? At the same time, if you're changing numbers too frequently, then people don't recognize your numbers and you are not able to achieve a good connect rate. If you pick up a call and you're not able to talk to the customer because of poor audio quality, that's the worst experience, right? So always need to opt for tools that are reliable and scalable in terms of calling. So you need to ask yourself the question that today I'm at 100 calls because we're talking about 3 years of growth, right? So if today I'm at 100 calls and that's 10xing the volume in 3 years, right? Would my tool be able to handle that? And if your tool is not able to handle that in terms of audio quality, then the tool is not scalable, and you need to replace it with something that gives you better audio quality and can, go ahead and conduct larger number of calls for you, or probably shift to a parallel dialer, right? And then if there isn't a defined follow-up process internally after the first contact is established, then that again kills the deal altogether, right? Now, let's talk about some metrics, right? Numbers that would show you the truth, right? So connect rate by hour. If you're identifying the high availability windows, then you would know that, what are the windows where you're getting the most connect rate, right? You can also evaluate connect rate by day. So there are various ways you can slice and dice that data. You can also go more granular into the data, analyzing the conversations you've had per hour in order to measure the productivity, and then the average attempts you've made to reach out to the prospects. In CallHippo, we have several interesting reports that would establish that, right? So call logs reports is one of the most comprehensive reports that we offer. Then there's something called the call report, which gives you the talk time that an agent has done. You can also have target talk time, and you can have the achievement at the end of the day right next to it. So those are some metrics that CallHippo offers in order to optimize connectivity. Right. Moving on. Yep. So here's a 4-week improvement plan. So first you need to measure that, hey, where are my gaps? So if you're not getting good connectivity, which markets are not converting for you? Which numbers are not converting for you? Why are you not getting good connectivity? Are there more of voicemail calls? Are the calls dropping off? Are you not having good conversations with the customers because the audio quality is poor? So you need to evaluate the current performance. You need to evaluate the gaps, right? Then you need to go ahead, and if it's a timing problem, if you're not reaching out to the customer in high availability windows, you need to sort of analyze and tweak your calling strategy in response to that. The caller ID strategy is again very essential. So if the customers recognize your numbers, there is always a high likeliness of them picking up. Versus if you're changing numbers too often, or rotating numbers too often, they would probably not trust the call coming in from you or your company, right? Then you have to have a really defined follow-up process. And so what I do with my team is that we create playbooks. So HubSpot is a tool that we use internally. And so we create playbooks, and within those playbooks, each step of the follow-up is defined in detail, and every agent is following the same process, right? So for example, if you're speaking to Pranav versus you're speaking to Utkarsh versus you're speaking to Mike and Daniel, so that doesn't really make a difference because the process is still the same. The outcome being the customer experience across agents is going to be absolutely the same, right? So we want to create systems that are scalable, that are process oriented, and that are not people oriented. So if even if the people change, even if you're speaking to a different agent, the system is so fine tuned that the customer experience that is delivered is always going to be the same, right? And then you need to keep on tweaking your strategy by reviewing data and refining your approach. Moving on. Right. So I've talked about a bunch of CallHippo features, right? And here are just some of the features that would help you improve connect rates. But I'll mention a few of my favorites. So we've been talking about AI calling a lot, right? And so what I do is that I analyze missed call rates for all of my clients. And then with missed call rates, what we do is that we go ahead and deploy AI voice agents for them, right? So missed call rates drastically reduce because in the off business hours or in the hours where agents are not available, an AI agent is taking calls and then transferring it to human agents, right? So that sort of optimizes their missed call rates, right? Another favorite feature of mine is sentiment analysis, right? Because pickup rates are fine, connectivity is fine. We are a conversational intelligence platform, right? So we are not only talking about connectivity, we are talking about metrics that are improving revenue, that are driving your calling performance, right? So sentiment analysis offers key insights, and reports like connectivity heat maps and all of those offer key insights, right? CRM integrated call logging is one of our top features. So we can integrate with most of the CRMs, Salesforce, HubSpot, Lead Squared, whichever CRM that you use, we integrate with that. And then finally, the calling workflows have to be structured so that, as I said, whenever you're connecting with different reps, the customer experience can be standardized. Moving on. Right. Um, So if you're ready to hear what the data is saying, I would invite you for a 15-minute quick demo of our tool, right? The sales team is ready to give you demos if you're interested in tracking how your calling volumes are going to scale over the next 3 years and what's going to be the agent performance and what your customers are really saying and what are the sentiments of the conversations that you're having with your customers. So Call Hippo is a tool that does great at that. So I'm happy to invite you for a 15-minute demo, and then we can take the conversation further from there if you like what you see. Moving on. Great. So I think that's majorly it. That's the end of our presentation. I'm happy to jump into questions if you guys have any. Utkarsh, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes, yes. The floor is open for the questions, and we have one question from the Nandu. What he says that he would like to understand how our dialer integrates with the HubSpot, particularly in terms of data sync and reporting. Additionally, our operating model requires us to rotate calling numbers every 1 to 2 months. Please confirm how is this managed within your system and whether there are any limitations. You can have a view on the chat box. It's mentioned.
Yes, he would also like to have a detailed view of the insight and analytics of your platform, provide specifically around calling patterns. Okay, great. Utkarsh, can you allow me to share my screen?
Yeah, definitely. I will stop my screen.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'll quickly show you. Right. So here we are. So when we talk about insights and analytics, right? So it all begins on the dashboard. So we offer you insights at a team level, and then you can have call analytics both at a team level, at a user level as well, right? So if you need more detailed reports, you can go ahead and download Excel files as well and slice and dice data yourselves. But we have built out these dashboards that would give you the major connectivity rates, right? If you go to a detailed view of our reports, what can also happen is that you're able to filter data by a lot of metrics. So you can filter data by callers, by country, by status, by dispositions, by tags, etc., etc. So it gives you various angles of analyzing the same data that you have, right? And so it depends upon your calling strategy, how you're going to go ahead and analyze data. You did talk about the HubSpot integration. So we've got a bunch of integrations over here within the integration section. and HubSpot is one of our primary native integrations, right? So if you go ahead and do the HubSpot integration, then if you're using the auto dialer, we can do is that we can grab a list from HubSpot and then create a campaign around it, and that campaign starts churning and connects calls to agents, whichever calls are connected to the humans, right? If you're using manual dialing, then we have something called the click to call extension, wherein you can just click on the call hippo symbol right next to a particular number, and it pops up a dialer and the call is initiated, and then that activity is synced back into HubSpot, right? You can sync back dispositions, you can sync back call tags, you can sync all of those metrics back into HubSpot, right? Was that it, or did I miss some part of his question? So we talked about the HubSpot integration, we did talk about analytics. That's majorly it, right? So he also talks about one very interesting thing, which is rotating numbers. I think, yes, that is one of the key things. We recently launched this feature, which is very interesting to me, is auto replacement, right? So we have an algorithm in the background that looks at the connectivity that you're getting through a particular number. And the moment the connectivity starts to decline, then there is an auto replacement mechanism, right? So the connectivity decline is the trigger, and then you can go ahead and replace or do an auto replacement of the number. I am more happy to have a detailed conversation with you if you do need to schedule a demo and look at all of these aspects in detail. I'm happy to go ahead and you can just drop an email to sales@callhippo.com, and you can go ahead and do a demo with us. Any more questions? Uh, any more questions to the people out there?
Right then, thank you so very much, everyone, for attending the webinar. Okay, we have got one notification. Okay, I would really
So
like a demo.
Nandu says
Sure, sure.
yes.
You can drop down your email ID, and we will be happy to connect with you.
Nandu, are you able to put your email in the chat box? And
Yeah,
my sales
definitely.
team would definitely connect with you.
Yep. All right, all right. I will share with the sales team. Sure.
Great, great, great. So thanks a lot, everyone. And I'm happy to sign off. And should you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email at sales@callhippo.com, and we'd be more than happy to assist you.
All right, all right. Thank you so very much, everyone, for your time, and to our special speaker, Pranav, for sharing the insights about the topic. And in case of any doubt or question, you can drop down on this mail ID. Our team will be more than happy to assist you. All right. Thank you so very much.